welcome you to this virtual live meeting that we'll have for today and tomorrow. And I'm just overwhelmed with people logging in a few days ahead of time to the other websites. And I hope that we will satisfy your expectations for the next 2 days. And then even afterwards, hopefully we'll keep on continuing with the conversation. So let me go over a few issues. First, I would like to say that when I last counted an hour ago, there's more than 175 participants who have joined. The response has been overwhelming, and we've had people from all over the Asia and Pacific area. We have scores of people from Myanmar, India, Thailand, Malaysia, China, Nepal, people from all over this area, and we also have a few people from the Middle East as well, and also a couple from the U.S. And we have investigators, members of IRBs, bioethicists, healthcare providers, undergraduate students, academic officials, people from the government. And so we have a very broad-based crowd here. Let me introduce the coordinator for the next session, Veena Pillai from Day1 Consultancy. She's been a trusted colleague for the last several months and have been helping me coordinate this virtual workshop. I'm gonna let her take over the second session, so help me welcome Veena Pillai for the second session. You're allowed to clap hands. All right, okay, no problem. All right, very good, thank you. All right, excellent. Veena, take over.
Thanks, Henry. Before I start and introduce a bit more about myself and what I'm going to speak about, I'd like to introduce Professor Kaveh Kushnut from Yale University, who will be moderating this panel. We are going to be doing this session as a panel with 3 different perspectives, looking at research with refugees and migrants. So, Kaveh, can I hand over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Veena. Thank you, Henry. As Veena mentioned, I'm Kaveh Kushnut. I'm an associate professor at Yale School of Public Health. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. So as Henry mentioned, the first session is looking at the ethics of doing research involving vulnerable population with a particular focus on migrants, refugees, and stateless individuals. We have 3 wonderful speakers. They're each going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to have actually a case study discussion afterward. So let me just quickly introduce our speakers. The first speaker you already met, Dr. Veena Pillai, who is a medical doctor and researcher based in Malaysia. She works with Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, and is a consultant at Day1 Consultancy, an independent research consultancy that conducts research to increase access to human rights for vulnerable populations. She's actively involved in ethics review of research projects in vulnerable populations through an independent ethics consultative service. The second speaker is Halima Akhlaqi, who's the manager of CISARUA Refugee Learning Center, a refugee-run school in Indonesia. She's from Hazara people of Afghanistan, but she was born in Iran, which is a country where I was born in 1989, as a refugee herself after her parents left Afghanistan 43 years ago. She holds a bachelor's degree in language and literature and worked as a volunteer teacher for 5 years in Mashhad in Iran before traveling to Indonesia. She has been with this refugee learning center since December of 2015, first as a teacher, then as an assistant manager, and for the last 12 months as the manager. And this refugee learning center hosts many researchers, academics, journalists, and student visitors every year. And our third speaker is Mujib, who is Rohingya from Myanmar, who has completed his bachelor's degree in mathematics. Mujib previously worked in an international NGO for almost a decade in Myanmar and continues to work in an international NGO in Malaysia as well. He works as a cultural mediator for Doctors Without Borders. He's currently doing research with the Rohingya refugees and other oppressed minorities from Myanmar. So with that quick introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Veena Pillai to share her presentation with us.
Hey, Kaveh, I'll just share my screen. All right, I trust everyone can see my screen. Just shout out if you can't. Thank you, Kaveh, for the introduction, and thank you, Henry, for the opportunity. My name is Veena, and as Kaveh mentioned, oh, really?
I can't see it. Right now we're seeing...
yeah, no screen.
So
Mr. Henry, I think the vibe is still sharing the screen too.
What's that?
Henry should stop sharing.
Right.
How's that?
That's
Oh,
good.
there, it's starting.
Yes, that's better. That's better.
Okay,
now,
got it.
Now we can see it.
Hang on a sec, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
All right, we're on. Okay, so my name is Veena, and as Kaveh mentioned, I'm a medical doctor and a researcher for vulnerable populations. I'm a consultant in an independent research consultancy called Day1, and I'm a medical field worker for MSF. Between these two roles of doctor and researcher, I've worked mainly with refugee and migrant populations, HIV-infected and affected populations, and in prison and detention settings. My interest and enthusiasm for ethics came from personal experience of carrying out projects with vulnerable populations and seeing the ethical dilemmas firsthand. I really wished at that point someone had pointed out this to me before I placed research participants in harm's way or potential harm's way. Many ethical issues that came up were not actually caught by ethics review boards that had reviewed my projects. And with all these experiences and colleagues facing similar experiences, that's why we decided to set up an ethics consultative service that provided a specialized review for vulnerable populations. So today, I just want to present an overview of the ethical considerations that you may want to take into account when reviewing or doing research projects dealing with vulnerable populations. But today's presentation will be focused on refugees and migrants. So the field of refugee research is diverse. Every refugee group, every refugee has a different story, traumatic experience. It is dynamic. With every policy change, new political turmoil, or health crisis like COVID-19, the situation changes at a fast pace for populations whose infrastructure is fragile. So with this dynamic nature of the field, it means that we and our research priorities also need to be dynamic. Research with refugees is also relatively new and exciting, and there are a lot of people with good intentions wanting to join the team on the topic. But with every specialization, like time taken to read and understand and connect with the community is needed before you jump in. We use the same ethical frameworks as we would use ordinarily for non-marginalized and non-vulnerable populations. But while there is an argument that in studies with human subjects, a potential risk or benefit is acceptable, when it comes to vulnerable groups, these potential risks and benefits have to be held under a magnifying glass and discussed with colleagues, ethics review boards, your research team, but most importantly, representatives of the community that you'll be doing this research study for and with. Community engagement or consultation is key to any research with vulnerable populations. In our first principle, respect for persons, this includes a proper informed consent with proper mechanisms in place to ensure understanding, manage false expectation, increase trust, and decrease and minimize the power dynamic. With beneficence, implementation science, which is a topic that will be heavily talked about in this workshop, is a great way to incorporate research in a meaningful way with vulnerable populations. Ordinarily, benefit to the community or increasing evidence or scholarship on a topic is suffice to satisfy a rationale. But with vulnerable populations, I'd like to challenge that we need a direct and clear benefit to the participants or a clear and direct benefit to the community. Vulnerable populations, and especially mobile populations like refugees and migrants, the infrastructure they depend on, legal, health, education, it can be sometimes fragile depending on the status in the country. They are also at higher likelihood of having faced trauma, and all these things have to be taken into consideration when risks or non-maleficence of studies are assessed. In terms of justice, participant selection can sometimes be difficult as often the same community leaders are used who are often have a lot of power and often male, and sometimes the population can be oversampled in one section of the community. All this is not that easy. I understand that. And for ethics review members, it might be more difficult if the projects are in a different community or different context to what you are used to. Or maybe sometimes the researcher hasn't described the benefit and risk thoroughly. So it is always recommended to insist on a local review. In that vein, to assist you with this, the following slides will cover some questions that you can think about while reviewing studies related to vulnerable populations. If you are not a reviewer and you're a researcher wanting to go into this field or already are in this field, you can look at these questions as questions to ask yourself or your team or colleagues while you're planning research studies. So when looking at the research questions selected, a reviewer must ask if it is appropriate and relevant, and not just in the eyes of the researcher. This question must also be important to the community, and the researcher should outline in their rationale and background if they have explored this. Look to see specifically if the researcher has balanced theirs or the funder's priorities with the needs of the community. The method should give us a lot of pause while we consider the characteristics of the population. What is their migration status? Are they commonly involved in activities that may be considered criminal, like working without proper documentation as they have no choice and aren't allowed to be employed in the country? Are they at risk of arrest and detention? Are the populations more visible as a result of our method? Are we making them a possible target for authorities? What are the women's perspectives on the topic? Have we considered gender dynamics in relation to this topic or in relation to the community? Are there any political tensions or conflicts of interest? The power dynamic is key in populations that may be disempowered for a variety of reasons. Consider if key persons in the research process have a connection to the community. For example, if I was a doctor in the refugee clinic and I started recruiting people to participate in my study, it would be difficult for the participants to say no to me, possibly fearing repercussions in treatment or favoritism if they said no or if they said yes. Informed consent is difficult when it is in another language. It is even more difficult if the population lacks literacy or if the language, like the Rohingya language, is one that is not written. In these cases, we often employ a repeat back method to ensure that the information has been fully understood before continuing. My colleague Mujib, who will be our last speaker on the panel today, will do a deeper dive into informed consent and from his experience on the ground. As mentioned at the start of the presentation, beneficence is key to acceptance of projects in populations that are vulnerable or are in humanitarian crises. The balance with risk it requires is more nuanced than usual. For example, will false expectations lead to an increased demand on the organizations supporting or serving this community? For one example, I did a study once with UNHCR's help. They were not collaborating, but they just supported, so the presence was there. And we made it very clear and repeatedly explained that it will not help them in terms of their UNHCR process, registration, resettlement. But no matter what, when they repeated it back, they had the understanding that it would come to some benefit to them in terms of their UNHCR process. I sat down with
Videoပေးထားတယ်ဒီမှာဟိုကလည်းထွက်လိုက်ဝင်လိုက်ပဲရောက်သွားမှမသိဘူးသူတို့လည်းမတွေ့ရအတန်းတော့ကြားနေ
I sat down with one of the participants after this project and asked why was it so hard to understand that this was not going to benefit them in this very specific way, and they said they could not believe that anyone would come and take all this information from them if there was no clear direct benefit to them, especially given the difficult situation and the crisis they were in. This is a common condition faced in researchers in acute humanitarian crises as well. Every player in that situation is supposed to be part of a solution. And sometimes collecting data alone, even if it may be helpful for the next crisis, is sometimes contested as being potentially harmful in the eyes of the community. And then it brings us back again to the center of what we're doing here. Has the researcher checked with the community to assess how best to provide a benefit to the community? So in terms of non-maleficence, we'll start with physical safety. Has the researcher ensured the physical safety of their participants? How are they protecting identifying data? Is the site itself secure? How are the participants going to get there? Will they be safe in their travel to the site? Has the researcher got a plan for what to do if local authorities question the project, depending on the status of the community-based research staff as well as the participants? As mentioned before, like every refugee group will have a different risk of having faced trauma. And the risk of triggering or distressing is quite high in these groups. We want to know if the researcher has got an established referral pathway, including support services and information about how participants can access them. This one is a bit of a combination of a non-maleficence and beneficence, where dissemination and communication of research findings is actually directly related to beneficence. And this might be one of the most common places where researchers kind of drop the ball. Maybe that's a bit of a blanket statement, but after this research study is done, making sure that this information is going down to the ground, to the community, to the people who serve the community, to the people whose programs can be impacted by this. Does the researcher have a strategy to communicate all these to people who might make an impact on the ground? And then on the other side of things, is there a risk that this information could worsen things for the participants? For example, if your study was on living conditions or work conditions in a certain country, and the publication of your study could maybe lead to a backlash and worsen restrictions on the groups. You have to think about the risk of what your study could do if the information is not pleasant to some of the stakeholders involved. In conclusion, always ask questions about the specific context. You can be familiar with a vulnerable population, but maybe the context changes a lot when it comes to the ethical concerns. Consider protections related to legal status. Always recommend local ERB approval if you're in a different country, or suggest experts from the affected population review the proposal as well, even if it's informally. Without community consultation from as early as planning the research question, it is unlikely to be able to do a research project which has no ethical concerns. Encourage students, your colleagues, ERB applicants to consult community early in a meaningful way. I think my colleagues on the panel will prove this correct, what I've said here correct with how valuable their presentations are going to be. I'll turn it back to you, Kaveh. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veena, for a wonderful presentation. Next, I'm going to ask Halima if she could share her slides with us. Veena, you also have Halima's in case she has trouble. You have her slides.
Sorry, yeah, I do have the slides.
Okay.
Halima, are you having trouble? Or I can't see you.
She on the
Hi, Kaveh and Veena. I think maybe we go with Mujib first because I think Halima got disconnected.
Okay. Okay. Mujib, if you could share your slides, please. Mujib?
Mujib, can you share your slide?
Hello. Yes, I'm trying to share the slides.
Yes, we can see it's coming.
All right. All right. Very good morning to all of you, and thank you very much to Henry and our coordinator, our moderator, Mr. Kavi, and Dr. Veena. Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to see you here. So, all right. As Kavi already introduced, sorry.
Oh, we can see you.
You can't see the slides.
I think that
Yeah, no slides.
Let me, Mujib, why don't you stop sharing and I'll share the slides for you. Okay? And then I'll just...
That's great.
Okay, stop sharing. You need to press stop share.
Yeah.
everyone will be bona fide IT people by the end of the second day. Learning how to share slides,
okay, Mujib.
muting yourself, blah, 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 all that stuff. Okay, very good.
All right. Very good morning to all of you again. As Kavi already introduced about me, my name is Mujib, and I'm a Rohingya from Myanmar. So I have been experienced working with the International Humanitarian Organization when I was in Myanmar, and continuously doing the humanitarian job even in Malaysia. So currently I'm working with the MSF as a cultural mediator and doing research on the Rohingya refugee population and other oppressed minority from Myanmar. So I have been experiencing a lot of things doing the research. So I am very much interested to work on the ethical research, because based on my experience, I realized that ethics is very important for a research. So today I would like to take this opportunity to speak about the challenges that we most probably face when we conduct the research in the refugee and migrant population or asylum seekers, especially marginalized community. So first of all, doing research in the marginalized population is a big challenge, because your target population may be from the different country with the different language and with the different background, different beliefs, different perception, everything might be the different. So as a researcher, in order for us to overcome all these challenges, we have to conduct our research section according to the research ethics and the principles. So there are a few challenges that we most probably face when we conduct the research, especially in the refugee community. So especially those who are who have the limited access to the education. So especially this consent form, informed consent. So we as a researcher have to read out the consent script to the participant, to those who doesn't understand or who doesn't read the script. So when we read out the script to the participant, and most of them, they may have the difficulties to repeat what I have just explained to them about the consent script. It because maybe they are not interesting or not concentrating on what I'm doing, or maybe the way I am explaining should be improved. And most of the time, most of the participants, they are very excited to sign on the consent script without fully understand what have written down in the consent script. So we as a researcher, we are responsible to make them understand before we ask them to sign on the consent script. And most of the participants, especially refugee community, when they are in the difficult situation, they always agree with the researchers to share their information with the third parties or the fourth parties without realizing their rights to say no if they want to. So in this condition, some of the people, they just expecting something from the researcher. That is why they are just saying yes to share their information with the third parties, but they have the right, full right to just say no if they want to. Can I please go to the next slide? All right, expectation of the beneficiaries. So when we work in the refugee community, so this refugee marginalized population are always in danger, at risk, they are in pain. They always have a lot of expectation from others because they really expect help or assistance from others, regardless of anyone, whether it's a researcher or a donor or anybody else. So they always expect something from the people because they need this help from others. So especially if the researcher is associated with the local NGO or international NGO or agencies like UNHCR, their expectation is increased. And most of the researcher, when we do the study about their difficulties, we do ask about their difficulties. So most of the participants thinks that we are in the right position to fulfill their needs when we are asking a lot of things about their difficulties. Can I please go to the next? All right. Harm to the participant. That's in ethics, maleficence. So this is something that we need to be very careful when we do the research, especially in the refugee and refugee or asylum seekers, because these people are marginalized community. They are at risk all the time. So sometimes some of the participants ask whether the study may result in harm. So it means that the participant is not understanding clearly what you have just said in the consent form. It means we as a researcher have to make sure everything is clear again, and we have to make them understand why we are going to do this project, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to do, and what will be the outcome of this project. Then they may understand that they will be free from harm. And most of the participants do not stop the conversation during the session, even though they seems like rushing to something else. So when the people are in vulnerable condition, they are like nervous or shy to say just no to someone who is something like helping or doing something better for them. So they are just nervous to say that. So in this situation, we have to read their mind, see their gesture, how they are like moving around, if they really seems like need to do something else. So we just have to let them go because they are not obliged to continue until end of the interview. And breaching privacy and confidentiality can lead to the domestic violence. So I mentioned two words here, privacy and confidentiality, two different words, but seems like these two words are similar, but is different, because privacy is very important if you conduct the research section in the participant residence or somewhere in your place in the office. So privacy should be maintained in order to avoid the risks of domestic violence. Privacy and confidentiality again. So this is something that we need to be very careful with when we conduct the research in the refugee community, in the marginalized community. For example, I just mentioned an example here. Husband or head of household did not let their wife or female to participate in the research section. A man wants to accompany when a woman wants to participate in the research session, which can breach the privacy and confidentiality. In some culture, especially in the Asia content, some culture, they most of the men do not let their wife to speak with a stranger, with another man. So in this situation, we just have to be very flexible to handle these kind of issues. And privacy will also be breached if the research section have conducted in the participant residence. So most of the time when most of the refugee and migrant population lived in the crack area, in the vulnerable situation. So their house is not as private as that we expect. So we have to make sure the place that we conduct the research section should be private in order to avoid the risks of harm to the participant. Next. All right. There are a few messages I would like to share with the researcher who would like to work in the refugee and asylum seeker setting. So these messages are based on my experience, what I experienced during my time. So I have just written here, the research activity is designed as an interview session. It is very important for us as a researcher to make them understand clear that this is not an interview, to make them an immediate action of your issues. But this is a research. It's a platform where we can witness or identify your highlighted issues and channel them to the right place or decision maker or policy makers. This research section may help to raise your voice, but we as a researcher are the responsible to keep anonymous and confidential. So when we work in with the refugees and asylum seekers, so these people came from different backgrounds and they understand that the interview is something that we can immediately get the benefit. For example, like a registration interview in the UNHCR. So when they sit for registration interview, they will definitely get some kind of documentation from the UNHCR. For example, like resettlement interview, and when they sit for the resettlement interview, they can expect any chance for the resettlement to a third country. So this kind of expectation. So we just have to make sure that this research section is not an interview that can benefit you immediately. But of course, this is a beneficent somehow to you or to your community later. Next. Safety and security. So this is very important things. When I conduct the interviews or working with the refugee community, I have to be very careful to make sure all the safety and security issues are covered. So for example, a researcher needs to take responsible of the safety and security of the participant. So when we we are thinking of doing the research in the refugee community, we have to first think about their safety and security, their status, so the venue that we're going to conduct the research, because that is the most important thing before we think of doing the research section. So we always need to take the responsibility of the privacy in order to minimize the risks of the harm to the participant. As I mentioned earlier, this privacy is very important, especially in the refugee community, because these people are targeted by some other people around them. So we have to be very careful with the privacy when we conduct the research section or doing any interaction with the refugee community. A researcher may think that the research is a project. It's a project. And it would be fine as long as we collect the information, but we are responsible not to exploit the rights of the marginalized population. So I like this sentence, because some of the beginners who start working in the research project thinks that, oh, this is just a project. If I work hard, I do something, then I will get promotion. So I just have to find my way to collect the data to do this study, then it will be fine. But we as a researcher have to be very careful and have to take the responsibility not to exploit the rights of the marginalized population. That's very important. Next, please. And again, informed consent. So based on my experience, this informed consent is very, very important, especially in the refugee community, especially in the area where we have imbalanced communication between the researcher and the refugee population. So in order to make a research section ethically, we as a researcher have to bear in mind that the informed consent is very important and a key to make a qualitative section that can not only make a participant in a right position of their efforts, time, and it can also reduce the risk of false expectation. But also the researcher will be free from any further consequences of the doubt of being able to collect the precise and accurate information. So in this situation, before we proceed to the study, we have to make sure everything is clear, all the agreement is clear between the researcher and the participant. Then we can give a clear option to the participant whether he wants to participate voluntarily in the research section. And it is necessary to ask whether they understood the consent, any confusion or any question, any doubt before we ask them to sign or before we proceed to our research, our study is very important. So autonomy. So especially autonomy is in the ethics, and autonomy means, most of you may know, independence. We just have to let our participant independence. We just have to give them a chance to take their decision independently. They are not obliged to participate in our research project, in our study, because they are just volunteer. So we just have to give them an option to take a decision whether they want to participate or not. So we as a researcher have to know that none of our participants are obliged to participate in our research project, even though they are agreed to. So in this area, I mean that, for example, a person agreed to continue the research project at the beginning and here in the consent form already. But at the middle of the research, he seems like he is not comfortable to answer you. So we as a researcher have no right to force him to answer me if he is not comfortable. So he has the right not to answer if he is not comfortable in this situation. We as a researcher have to keep in mind whatever we do must be according to the research ethics and principle even until the publication. Because some of the researcher thinks that we have to follow the ethics and principle and as long as we are with the participant. But the material, the data that we collect from the participant, these properties belongs to the participant, not the researcher. So whatever we do, whatever we use these materials, we have to do with the acknowledgement of the participant.
This has been an excellent presentation, but thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. This wonderful presentation really deserves a whole session in and of itself. So why don't we start with the next speaker?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me try if I can share my screen. Okay, hello to everyone. I'm Halima and very pleased to be invited to talk to you today. As you heard, I lived all my life as a refugee and still I'm carrying this title. My past 6 years that I live in Indonesia, waiting to be resettled in a third country. I work as manager in CISARUA Refugee Learning Center. CRLC is a school for refugees, and as CRLC is the first school established for refugees in Indonesia, we are usually in the center of attention of people who wants to come to house many researchers, university students, and journalists. In CISARUA, we like to have researchers. We know that what we are doing in our center is very important, and we want that other people also know about us and know what we do. We believe that research is important. Why we think that research is important? Recently, we have just watched the US election. Usually, media and the different governments make propaganda against Middle Eastern. This propaganda is usually negative and very strong. And I think it's very necessary to have independent researchers who provide a real picture of refugees or Middle Eastern people. Since Trump was elected, we have seen that millions of people changed their mind, and I believe the researchers can change the mind of people by their work, because they can spread awareness and they can make the people to have better understanding of what is happening in everywhere. By their work, the policy of countries change at the end towards refugees. Even though if this work can't direct to this benefit, at least they can help ordinary people to have a better people at the end select the next government. The first point that I would like to talk is benefits. I know that university researchers, they must prefer talk about the benefit of their research with the interviewees before. And maybe usually the benefits of research don't go directly to the refugees, but refugees in CISARUA generously will participate and will cooperate with you and give you insight to their lives. According to my observation, many refugees will participate with you, and they think by participating with you, they will help themselves somehow, because they hope that they can change the policy of the countries. I have been in a community meeting recently, even though the topic of that meeting was something different, but in that meeting, the biggest point of the discussion was how to change the policy of the people. For example, one group, they were arguing that by positive activities like running a school for refugees or group sporting, we can share a positive picture of ourselves and try to help it, to change the policies. But the other groups were arguing that if we run the schools, it makes UNHCR or maybe other countries to careless about us. I share this point, this story, to make you understand that how your research can benefit the wishes of refugees to change the policies. If you only publish your work in journals or with academic books, only other researchers will read your work, or maybe some university students. But I ask you to think about your position and your ability that you can help to change the mind of ordinary people who select the government of countries. Probably I can think of more kind of benefits that you can give to refugees, but if you see the refugees something beyond the subject of your research, you will probably find a way to give them. For example, some of the people who work with us, they offer workshop, or sometimes they share their knowledge with us. And if you also think beyond that just doing the research, you will find a way to contribute to our community. The second point I would like to talk is consent and power. Working with refugees, the consent is a complex thing. Refugees see researchers as powerful people, even though you might not feel as powerful. But for us, you have titles, like you have you are doctor, professor, or you have passport, you have a good career. And especially if you are a white person with a successful career, and especially if you are older, you seem very especially powerful to our people. This kind of idea drives our people to speak with the researchers. Besides being happy to participate or not, this kind of idea about researchers make the refugees to speak with you. The other point is that people refugees have fear and also concern. Their fears make them to leave their countries, and their hope for a better and safe life made them to be refugees. Maybe you don't directly offer them any incentive or coercion, but I believe that in relationship between refugees and researchers, coercion and incentive are embedded in the relationship, because their fears of the past and their hope about the future makes them to participate with you in your research. I don't know the answer to these challenges, but I just want you to be aware of these points. The second point is whole lives and whole people. Refugees are not just refugees. We come with histories, we come with skills, we have fears, we have relationship. When you come and ask us questions, you need to be careful and see us as whole person. For example, in our school, when researchers come, usually they speak with adults, but still they have some chat with kids, and they ask them questions like, where are you from, or what do you miss about your country, or where do you want to go? These questions might seem innocent questions, but beside that, these questions remind our kids that they are not normal people. It reminds them about their legal status. It makes them to feel that they are outsider and they are not normal kids. In our school, we try our best to provide a good upbringing for our children, to make them laugh, grow, and learn. And we don't want to destroy their normal life. So if you interview with adults, you still need to ask them about their life as refugee. But what I ask you is to consider the whole person and the effects of your question on this person as not just being a refugee, a person, a human being. When you meet us, you can stay for a longer after just interviewing. You can stay with us and have a cup of tea and speak about non-refugee things. Then it makes you able to understand us better. Men and women. I understand for many years, researchers mostly focus to speak with the male leaders of communities, but in my community, I see that researchers or visitors, they raise to speak with women and also children. I guess maybe these people, they try to show themselves as people who are writing about women empowerment. Maybe writing only about men don't pull that much emotions of readers, or not that much readers. But we usually, men, women, and children, we live together. So if you want to understand us, you need to consider all of us together. Power and entitlement. I want to share you another personal story of what I have observed in my school. We have made friends with an international school that is in Jakarta. We usually visit their school, and sometimes they come down to our school. Once when their students came to our school, they asked lots of questions from our kids about, like, how did you come to Indonesia, or did you come here by boat, or why you became refugees. In that day, usually our students are very noisy and confident, but in that day I observed that our students became more and more quiet. They lost their confidence, and for a while I was thinking, why in that visit, instead of making friendship, our students lost their confidence? Why our students felt themselves lesser? Again, I share this story because to make you notice, if we are refugees, it doesn't mean that every person have the right to ask any question. Consider that what would be the impact of your question on refugees. If you ask us about our journey and you go with the data, You will give us a reminder of our status and our memories and the emotions that come from that speaking. One of the other points I would like to talk about is to be in touch with us. The people who visit us, some of them they stay for only 1 day, some of them they stay for a longer time. If you stay for only 1 day, you will find some kind of understanding, a taste of our life. But if you stay for a longer time, you will be able to see the life from the view of refugees. If you come for a day, we try our best to show you our best hospitality and make your visit a good one. But if you stay for a longer time, by experiences very little things like being stuck in the traffic of Indonesia or trying to get food, to access to doctor and these usual things, you will be able to experience our life by yourself. So I ask you to be in touch with us and ask us, for example, sometimes send a message to us, try to come to us for the second time, or invite us to the event like this one to speak with you. The other point is interpreters. Most researchers, they need interpreters. And these interpreters are usually also refugees themselves. When these interpreters help you, they have to listen to all the saddest stories of other refugees. Think about the impact of listening to all kind of these things on the interpreters. I think, think about this one, that how you can take care of your interpreters and also the impact of listening to these stories on yourself, how you can take care of yourself. What I want you for the last point is to remember to take care of everyone in your research and consider every person in your research as a human being. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Halima. What would be sort of a relevant research project to work with refugees? This is a big question because the priority of the researcher or the funders may be quite different than what the refugees need. So that's an important question that has come up. I don't know if Veena or any of the panelists want to talk about this. How do we make sure that there is consistency or between what the researcher is trying to get out of the research and what the participants need? Veena?
I can start. I mean, for me, it's always going to be a similar answer, probably for all the questions, is that you need to talk to the community. And engaging with the community and participating with the community isn't always just like talking to people like Mujib and Halima who have so much knowledge on this. That is a part of it, but it's also about making sure you are talking to different intersections of the community and speaking in language that they can understand and that they understand where you're coming from. So this doesn't take, like, it's not just going to visit, you know, a village or going to visit an NGO. It takes time, and it takes a little bit of humility in the researcher to understand that they can't like do an impactful research like that. And it's a relationship, not just a one-off project.
Mujib and Halima, have you had researchers approach you to conduct research that it just doesn't seem relevant? And if that happens, how do you respond?
Yeah, one time it happened and we didn't cooperate with them. They were asking about the policy of Australia regarding refugees.
Mm-hmm.
Kaveh,
Yep.
let me ask something from Mujib and Halima. A lot of questions dealt with refugees or people that have needs, emotions, wants, just like anybody else. So, and Mujib talked about this issue as well, that we have this dyad, or what I mean is we have the researchers, and then we have the people as objects being researched. And Halima, you had a very good slide about empowerment and entitlement. So how could participants be made to be co-equals in this enterprise of research? What could the researchers do to empower the people who are participants? And maybe even that word is not good. We used to say subjects and then participants. So tell us, how do researchers could empower the refugees?
Okay, you said how researchers. Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
How could researchers ensure empowerment, make you co-equals, partners in the research, make you part of the project? Help us here.
I think if it depends on the view of the people who come and visit us. If you see us like any other person, if you come to us to just make friends with us and know us, it directs the kind of questions you ask. When you just come to have a research, ask question, take a note and write a paper, you won't see us as a human being.
Right, we're just there to, one social scientist said, we're just coming to steal your stories. If a researcher comes in with a certain mindset, how do we change that?
So I think based on the Henry's question, I think we can empower the participants if we are in the right position. So there are a few experiences. Some researchers practice like deceptive hope giving to the participant. So when the researcher is in the right position, presenting themselves as a researcher with the ethic and the principles, so it won't have any kind of barrier between the researcher and the participant. And the participant will have a visible option to decide whether he wants to participate in the research.
I appreciate those thoughts, and I am thinking that we need to have a dedicated webinar on this issue in the near future. And I'd like to invite Halima and Mujib back and focus on changing mindsets, and so that there's more solidarity in the research than this dyad of researchers and researched. Other questions, Kaveh?
There was a question asking whether there is an agency that would actually look after the rights of the refugees. And then I know you talked about the IRBs, but is there an agency that can protect to make sure refugees are not being exploited in research? Any of the panelists want to respond to that?
I think in Malaysia, UNHCR does sometimes respond when they are aware of research that is being done, and they do give their opinion, but actually they have no power to actually stop the research from being done. I do really think it's up to the researcher to ensure this.
Well, in the informed consent form, what contact information do you give the research participants regarding if they have a question about their rights? Isn't that part of the informed consent form?
Yeah, it is.
And so what person or entity is put down?
So it depends which ERB it went through, and if the project even went through an ERB. Because if it's done in NGOs and done vulnerable populations, there's no one to actually regulate whether things go through an ERB. So regulation is it's a good question because it's super important and it's patchy.
Okay, something to continue the conversation. Other one or two more questions, Kaveh?
Sure. There was another question about your experience sharing data back to the refugee population. I think Veena talked about this. I think Halima talked about this. I think Mujib talked about this. Are there sort of some potential pluses and also minuses? We do have an obligation as researchers to share back, but could it sometimes actually add harm or create harm? Any experience with that?
All right. Currently, I'm working for the Medicine Inform Theories in the advocacy department. So we have different kind of research session in our project. So we do have regular community meeting with the community members and the community leaders. So during this time, we do have the discussion between us and the community people. So we do give some kind of feedback in general, what we can do with this kind of data that we have collected, but not as specific, not something that can identify the specific participant, but we, in general, we just give them a general feedback to the community people in order to make them happier to participate in our project.
Any other panelists want to add anything? Is there a potential for harm if you're looking at a health issue, let's say, that is stigmatized, let's say substance abuse or something like that? Could it potentially bring additional harm or stigma to the community?
I think definitely, like, let's look at TB or COVID, for example.
Yeah.
If we do a study of prevalence of TB, HIV, COVID, any infectious disease, and we want to be like, look, guys, this is a major issue among migrants. We need programs, we need attention, and media picks that up. And suddenly it's, oh, these migrants, these refugees are bringing this disease to our country, which it's not usually the case. It's about the living conditions creating these diseases for them. It can really be turned around. And does that mean you don't publish your data? No, but you have to be extremely careful. So you can't just publish and then leave it to, the powers that be. And again, the question of, are you a researcher? Are you an advocate? That's something you have to ask yourself at the start of the project, not at the end.
Thank you for that. Do we have time for any more questions, or do we need to move on to the case?
It would be good for people to go, I think, into small groups and continue the conversation in smaller groups, and then come back, I think.
Right. So we have the first case study, sort of the main case study we want to discuss. And then we have a second one in case we have time, but I'm not sure we're going to have the time, frankly. And case one has two parts. We're going to give you some time to discuss part one, and then we will post the part two in the comment chat box for you to access the information and tackle any remaining question you may have.
130 participants, or maybe 120 if I take out the faculty. So let's, how many people do you want in the group? 10? Should we have 12 breakout rooms?
That sounds reasonable. Is everybody back?
I'm not sure people know what group numbers they
I see. They don't know. I see.
After
They don't.
you,
Oh, they don't know.
so maybe we can just ask
Can we present?
people to
Yeah, can we
volunteer. I think
present?
that
Okay.
Our
Go
group,
ahead.
we are, can we present?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Can I ask May to just project her? We have written up some points.
Oh, wonderful.
May, can you project it? We got a case one study. Basically, it is TB. They're planning to do a screening for the patients for tuberculosis in migrant population in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So we had two important questions. The first one, can you go down, May? Yeah. Please analyze the scientific and ethical aspects of the above proposed study. So we found that there are a lot of scientific issues which is not addressed in that proposal. Like, for example, what was the clear inclusion and exclusion criteria? Who will they include? Will they include children, adults, elderly, women, pregnant women? And who are the groups to be excluded, which has not been very clearly mentioned in that study. And we are also looking at, do they really want to do this in a vulnerable population? Why can't you do it in a non-vulnerable population? Can it be done in a non-vulnerable population? And why do they want to do it in the migrant population? So we are worried that if it can be done in vulnerable population, it's great, but can it be first tried it in a non-vulnerable population, and then if you really want to help the migrant population, you can look into them. But the problem is we are worried about discrimination in this category of population. And we also found that there are a lot of ethical issues. For example, we are worried that in the respect for person, the informed consent is only in English and Bahamas, okay, which is a Malaysian language. We were worried that whether all will know the language, Bahasa, whether all will know this language, and what if the migrant population does not know this language, they know some other language. So make sure that the consent forms are prepared according to the population, what language they speak, and it should be understandable by the participants. And we also have a challenge here again, because we are worried that again there can be chances of discrimination, or confidentiality can be broken if they have to sign this consent form. Rather, we suggest there can be oral consent or a group consent, especially in people who don't read and write. So that also is another ethical challenge. And we are worried about the confidentiality of the results also, whether it will be maintained confidential or not. And also, whatever samples are collected, we are worried whether it will be used further, or whether it will be destroyed after initial use of that study. And going on to the other issues, like respect for the community, whether the community can be community engagement can be there before they start the study, to assure that there won't be any discrimination, or there won't be any, and there will be a lot of benefits by this study. And involving the leaders and the stakeholders in the planning of the study would be great. And also, as we mentioned earlier, the justice. How will the recruitment be done? How are the participants selected? Who will take the consent? So these are some of the ethical issues we thought about. How are these illegal migrants be protected from potentially being arrested by the police? And we are also looking at the rights and security after, will it be upheld by the government? No? So that's what we are worried about. And how are the identity of the participants be protected? If at all they have to sign the consent form, will it be protected, or will it cause legal problems to them later? Last few points, beneficiaries. What are the direct benefits of the participation in the study? It's mentioned that they'll be screened and referred to appropriate facilities. But after that, are they promised that they'll be given treatment? If, let's say, they have been diagnosed with tuberculosis, will they be given free treatment, or will they not be given? So those details have to be mentioned in the proposal, which are not being mentioned. And a few more points on as a members of the ethics committee. So what are the ethical challenges we'll be facing? May, can you go up? Yeah. So some of the issues which we thought about was, sorry, can you go down? The second point we're talking about. Yeah. So what are the potential risks for the participants and how it will be mitigated? So the consent process, which we already talked about, preferable to have a group consent or oral consent rather than a written consent or where they have to sign. How are the participants be protected from exploitation, coercion, or deceit? How do you ensure that the potential participants understand the research that they are participating in? How will the participant and the community will get direct benefits from the study? Who are the team involved in the study? Is there an infectious disease expert in the team and advocate available? And also, and the language in which they speak. And how will the recruitment process be done? So these are, we didn't have adequate time, but this is the points which May and Namita, May and myself put it up. Arati and Meghna also joined, and we all put up these points. Thank you.
Wonderful. Dr. Johnson, you had a fantastically rich discussion. Very, very impressive.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
We have to sign them up for a facilitator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was such a rich conversation you had. And many of these points came up in our group too. Any other groups, any other issues you want to add to what Dr. Johnson just said?
Sir, I would like to add some points.
Please.
Like as an IRB member, at which site the study will be done, what is the site of the study, the competence of the researcher, and who pays for the test. That is not really mentioned. Whether they will mention in the informed consent who will pay for the test. If that, who is the sponsor? Who is the sponsor involved in the study? And screening of the third parties. In case somebody comes up positive, what about screening of the third parties?
Well, I have a question. Dr. Johnson, you mentioned about screening a non-vulnerable group.
Yes.
But isn't that the purpose of this study?
Yeah.
Is to
yes, Dr. Henry. I think whenever the issue about vulnerability comes in, I think the first aspect we need to look is whether this study is important in this population. That's the very first important question. Is it justified doing this study? Yes.
Okay, well, that's a good question. So what is the purpose of this study?
Yeah, to look at tuberculosis in this population because of the settings in which they are. But I think as a process, we need to look at, is it really justified doing this study? Can we do the study in a non-vulnerable population also?
No, but why are they doing it in this group?
Yeah, because probably they are exposed to those conditions in which they are more prone to develop tuberculosis. Probably.
Well, I mean, why have they not been screened before?
No idea. Probably they do not have those facilities. Probably.
Well, how did they enter the country?
Okay. I mean, through illegal methods. Illegal migrants. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Firdaus from Malaysia. Not Macintosh. My name is Firdaus. I'm from Malaysia. To answer Prof. Henry.
We only want the Malaysians to talk.
No, sorry, we don't have much experience with immigrant population, except that interstate immigration happens in India. But we don't have much experience with that. Maybe that is the reason I may not be able to answer that question.
Okay, just to point out a few things that we mentioned in our group just now. Kaveh did mention about we did discuss about the scientific justification. This would be I think will answer Prof. Henry Silverman's question. We are not clear as to what is the scientific justification of this research. Why do they need to do this research among migrants? Why not other populations, for example? And why? And my question was, why is it not being done as part of the, if there's a concern among the community, they should just implement it as part of the public health policy. So, so the thing is, why do they need this?
No, I think, sorry to interrupt, I think they're given justification for that. In the statistics, if you see, review of literature, they say that there has been a jump of almost 49% of tuberculosis in that population. If I'm sure, Dr. Henry, they've given a justification in that case study that there has been a jump of 49% of the tuberculosis patient. That is the reason I think they would like to do this in this group, no? If I'm sure.
We did discuss this as well. It was not clear whether the report referring to the migrants in the country or the migrants who come from other countries, you know. And I think I have to also mention that in the proposal it says migrants. They do not mention any illegal migrants. So we cannot assume that these are illegal migrants. They are migrants in general. Yeah.
I think the 49% they were referring to is about the increase in the number of migrants, not really the number of tuberculosis cases.
No, but legal migrants are screened. Legal migrants are screened, not the illegal migrants. No, I think that's the point of the study. Maybe Gracel, I think we discussed that in our group. Gracel is another Malaysian. Maybe Gracel, can you
I see somebody
how
with
to
the
get the target population?
Yeah, so we sort of discussed about getting the full literature review before actually planning or doing the study. And it's important that we find out first what's the prevalence that's already available. And also we need to find out more information from probably the NGOs or the organizations who work very closely with the migrants, whether they are the irregular migrants or the documented migrants. I think that's what we were talking about, as well as the sampling method, whether the sampling method is also a scientific sort of problem, or whether the sampling method is actually the correct method to conduct a prevalence study. Was that it, Dr. Christina?
I think we also discussed that it's important to identify which areas the research is going to be done, you know, because it's important that you get the target population. We are working on the assumption that the illegal migrants have not been screened properly. The legal migrants can go through that procedure. So it is with the IOM, and the IOM is concerned about the health of the illegal migrants. No? So it's very important that the location where this study is going to be done has to be identified, no? So that you are able to access the target population specific to this particular study. No? And therefore, in the group, they said they work with an NGO who are working with illegal migrants, you know, so that it's targeted rather than, you know, looking for unscreened TB cases in the general population.
I see a hand up from R.A. Rosales. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes. My concern is, again, identify if this is disease surveillance.
You're choppy.
Research. Because if the concern is then why not, as mentioned earlier by one of our participants, why not just do disease surveillance, health registry of all those migrants, so that we know that also in our group is about again, it's because they are vulnerable population. What happens if it is discovered that they do have the disease? What happens to their migrant status? So that's why privacy and confidentiality was discussed as very important in terms of whether, and also the identification of the responsibilities and the protection of the participants, whether this be disease surveillance or whether this be research, and those would be important points. And again, as mentioned, there are 3 million migrants in Malaysia. Why is this going to be the study be done on 300 participants only? And so that's the issue of sampling and recruitment of participants. It's also again needs to be clarified. So, thank you.
Dr. Savita D. I see
Hello.
Dr. Savita D.
Yeah.
raised.
I'm Dr. Savita from India.
Yes.
I look at this from a little different perspective from what has been discussed. I actually applaud the viewpoint of the researchers why they have taken up this study. See, the legal migrants are already screened, and there is no risk of spread of the tuberculosis to the other population or suffering of the migrants by themselves. But here, the researchers have taken up they've been strong enough to look at the migrants who have not been screened, and that is of a very public health importance, significance, I feel. So I feel this study is important among the people who have not been screened. But of course, we need to ask relevant questions as discussed to make sure that there are no legal implications as well as have full participant protection. This is one point I would like to bring out. Another point I think is this is a very highly vulnerable group, and the consent process is the most important thing that worries me. So I would not only want a translation in the regional language, but I think I would mark this study as an IEC member for a surprise audit during the consent process itself to make sure that the research fellows on the field are carrying out the consent process correctly. I think these are the things I would like to add.
Jyoti?
Yeah, I should first of all congratulate and thank Dr. Johnson for such an elaborate, relevant review of the whole case. So my concerns are about sample size and sampling. So who was this 300 calculated? What was the basis? Will it be truly representative of a 3 million population is one of my concerns. The other issue is that it is a respondent-driven recruitment. So will it be a true representation of the population which is being sampled? Because as I mentioned in my group as well, if it is a respondent-driven sampling, it's very unlikely that the people who are afflicted with TB or people who are unwell would come forward and be part of the study. Be mostly people who are more up and about. So you may not actually get a true representation of the prevalence of TB in the population. The other issue which we considered in our group was that we would like a little more information on who are the researchers. Is it the government? Is it a private agency? Are they being funded? So these are my issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Henry, we are a little bit over time. I don't know if you want to keep going or should we take a break?
That's up to you.
I see a couple other hands. Let's see. I see Poach. Is it Poach?
Yes. Oh, hi. My only question is again with regards to the sampling or the sample population. Maybe being a migrant and then refer a fellow migrant to the study, there might be, as explained during the presentations earlier, I think by Miss Vina or Miss Halima, I think that there might be some expectation of, something in return if I join this, aside from, maybe getting tested for TB and then getting treatment for it, which is not also indicated in the study. So would the benefit, I would join because I would expect a benefit rather than, if there's none, then I wouldn't. Even if a friend refers me to join or be part of the research. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I have someone raise some interesting questions on the chat box about whether is this a research study or a public health activity. I mean, talking about prevalence. And that's not research. That's not leading to generalizable information. That's not exploring unknown phenomenon about the human world, and something that could be applied universally. So I mean, why is this? I mean, this is public health surveillance and not research. So why is this a research study? Why is this being billed as a research study?
May I answer that? May I answer that?
Yes, please.
Yes, no. I
Only
think
if
that,
you agree with me.
no, I will say why it is research. Because in low and middle income countries, we are not assured that there is a good surveillance system, and many times the public health system will outsource a study like this, no? So as to find out what is the real data in populations that are in the periphery. In other words, this is not about people in the mainstream population, no? And usually many of the surveillance studies are not able to capture the prevalence of such diseases. So I think it can be justifiable, you know, for a group of researchers to do this kind of research. You know?
But that doesn't turn an activity into research. I mean, research is a systematic investigation leading to generalizable knowledge.
They can get
phenomenon.
That's why we're saying
just because you outsource something doesn't make it magically into research.
No, but I think the important thing is they have a scientific protocol to be able to determine the prevalence. That is the
that's fine. I have no problem with that, but that's a public health activity, not research.
It's a baseline. I don't know whether, you know, it's being done. If it's a public health activity, it should be done by the health authorities. Now, I don't know whether this is being done by the health authorities or is it a private, an NGO that's interested in prevalence of tuberculosis.
Does an activity, whether it's research or not, depends on who is doing the activity?
Right. Who is doing it, you know?
Now, that doesn't determine whether the activity is research or not.
Because in social science, that's going to be baseline data. If there's no baseline data,
that's fine. Why don't we take this further offline? Oh, by the way, definitely we could use the discussion forum on the education website to continue many of these fine discussions. Kave?
I see a couple other points, but I don't know if you want to just, what is it, 11:40 now? Any last minute question before we take a break?
I only need 10 minutes of sleep, don't worry.
I think this already came up, but you know, the protocol said there's no risk to subjects, but clearly some individuals may be deported.
At risk, right.
And if they screen positive, they may be asked to leave or not be allowed to enter the country. And that obviously needs to be mentioned by the researchers.
Privacy.
Right. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Thank you for a very rich discussion. I'll turn it over to you, Henry.
This was an excellent session on many levels. So I want to thank all the participants for a wonderful session. And let me, I think there's many different themes from this session that could easily be written up and submitted to the journal. So I want everyone to think about what could be written up and, you know, tie it into COVID in some way. And so I want to motivate that as well. This was just, I mean, listen, this was, for me, very well worth it to stay up. My bedtime usually begins at around 8:30 at night. So this is like I'm living on fumes right now. So anyway, why don't I know there's an issue with the beeps when people join, but the only way to get rid of it is to start a new meeting, and I don't think we're in the mood for that. Why don't people could turn off the videos and, you know, do whatever you have to do for, what time is it? So we'll come back at noon. Well, come back at midnight, and we'll start the second session. Okay. Any other questions about that? Is 20 minutes enough of a break for you guys? Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We have a voice. Okay. See you in 20 minutes. Okay.
All right, see you. Take care.
Okay, very good. Very good. So I'd like to spend the next 30 minutes on the issue of talking about clinical research in public health emergencies, and in particular COVID-19 pandemic. So I like to, several topics I like to talk about is go over some definitions, historical examples of previous epidemics, the importance of doing research during the time of the epidemic, and go over this concept of research exceptionalism. Like, do we do research in a different way during times of pandemic? So we'll talk about innovative study designs, timely review without undermining substantive protections. We'll talk about informed consent, and also data and sample sharing global in a global way. So the first thing I want to try out, if you bear with me, go to your computer, smartphones, go to the website, go to menti.com. Everybody do that. It's a little activity. And use that code 1888917 and answer this question. Do you think research during a pandemic maximizes the possibility that potential participants are vulnerable? Let me have your vote on that. Okay, good. Not sure. Honest person. Yes. Or yes. So far, no no's. Okay. All right. 1 no, 4 not sure. Okay. Okay, well, I think we have an overwhelming response. The response is yes. Okay. The potential for vulnerability. In a previous survey I did,
Hello.
actually, a lot of people said yes, uncertain. Very few people said no. And during the breakout room, we'll talk about what specifically increases vulnerability. Okay, so we'll save that for the breakout room. So, what counts as a global health emergency? Well, obviously, a concern of more than one country, many causes, infectious diseases, natural disasters, and human-made disasters as well. So the history, we have the 1918 influenza pandemic led to a large amount of deaths. Then we had the SARS pandemic in 2003, and then the H1N1 pandemic, and in 2009, and infected 1.4 billion people, and then Ebola outbreak in West Africa, 2014, 2016, and we'll talk a little more about Ebola in just a few minutes. So, what are the lessons learned from previous epidemics? Well, essentially what I want to go into is what kinds of research are needed in global health emergencies. Well, one, we want to make diagnosis quicker and easier. We want to develop new vaccines and treatments. We want to improve the understanding of the concerns of people affected by the emergency. We also want to adapt existing ways of caring for people so that the services are appropriate and sensitive to their needs. And also, we want to address inequities caused by the disease and understand better the underlying vulnerability. So if you look at this, we see that these two are mainly biomedical research, and these three are mainly social science research. So IRBs need to be adept at reviewing social science research during pandemics. And we'll say more about that later. So specifically, types of research about the virus itself, animal and environmental research on the virus origin, epidemiology studies, clinical management studies, infection prevention and control, including health workers, protection, therapeutics, vaccines, research as well, social science in the outbreak response, and also health inequity research, which we'll talk more about tomorrow. So global health emergencies Now, I mentioned all this research we need to do, but global health emergencies are challenging environments in which to conduct the research. The pandemics involve disruption and great health needs and other urgent needs. They are likely to be accompanied by time pressures to act that may be in tension with standard research timelines, anxiety and distress on the part of the participants, researchers, and the wider community where the research is taking place. Other challenges for researchers include rapid turnover of workers, the inherent dangers of doing research in the emergency setting, the tension between doing research and the immediate emergency response, especially in the times of great need. So, however, even though it's challenging to do the research during the times of pandemic, it's important to do the research because without the research, there is the risk of providing inadequate, ineffective, or even harmful care. Essentially, we need the research to obtain evidence for clinical management in public health decisions. We need for infectious diseases, effective diagnostics, medications, and vaccines because they're not available for a new illness. And without these medical countermeasures, the evidence for their use in infectious disease is often limited. So time is of the essence in a public health emergency. So we need to gather the data during the time of the epidemic. And as we can see now during COVID, without the essential drugs and vaccines, we're running into an economic turndown. And essentially, we have a narrow window of opportunity to enroll patients during the peak times. So, as I said before, this is a very challenging time to do the research, but time is of the essence. So, because the window for learning in pandemics is often short, we need to balance the scientific rigor against the speed. So I want to ask you a question to the, let's see how I want to ask you a question. Go back to menti.com, use the code. Yes. Should one relax the requirements of rigorous research in order to speed up research? Yes or no? Okay, so Let me give you a few more seconds. All right, so a large majority are saying no. So I guess maybe it depends on what do we mean by speeding up research. So let's explore that. Okay, so what kind of ethical issues arise in research in global health emergencies? So essentially, we have to have the appropriate study design, has to be sensitive to the context in which research occurs. We have to do flexible review, and I'll talk about what we mean by flexible review. We have to look at the enhanced risk to research participants due to the uncertainty of the effect of drugs, and also we have to achieve meaningful consent to ensure that people's interests are respected. Other issues is equity issues. How do we do research addressing health inequities caused by the pandemic? How do we engage communities meaningfully during these times when there are issues about power and influence? How do we achieve greater fairness in collaborations between researchers, especially between researchers in different countries? And also, how do we consider about sharing data and biospecimens ethically with other researchers in other countries? So let me bring up the Ebola trials, okay, which presented some challenging issues. The issue is, so in terms of research study design, when the current clinical standard of care is ineffective, is it ethical to randomize patients? If you have an experimental drug, is it ethical to do a randomized study having a placebo group and denying half the study population this experimental drug? So essentially, what happened in Ebola was exactly that. The standard of care was considered very ineffective, and the issue was would it be unethical to withhold potentially beneficial experimental drugs or drugs that have been approved for other illnesses from people in desperate need? So the assumption was that in the early stages of development, these new drugs may be better than the standard of care. So is it ethical to randomize participants to standard of care? So essentially, the issue is, is there true equipoise in a times of pandemic? Now, equipoise meaning that to do randomization ethically, one has to have genuine uncertainty between the two interventions. So the issue is, do we have a lack of equipoise in these study designs, especially during pandemics. So that's the question. And in the beginning of Ebola, there was a push not to do randomized trials. But however, the counter argument was that, well, the so-called novel interventions, and we're seeing that here, most of them don't work. So we're fooling ourselves thinking we're so desperate for these drugs, we're thinking that or hoping that they will work. So people talk about therapeutic misconception. Actually, what's happening is therapeutic optimism. So essentially, just to speed this up, where was the, right, so even during Ebola, there was clinical equipoise at that time, and clinical equipoise is applicable during a public health emergency, and clinical equipoise should play a key role in designing clinical trials. And now, having said that, so there is this issue, should there be pandemic research exceptionalism? So what I'm trying to say, should we have different rules of doing research during times of pandemic? And so should we relax the rules of sample size, the use of unvalidated surrogate endpoints in our research studies? And what about the lack of randomization or blinding during research? And one of the exercises in the breakout room is there's a list of studies that are being done during this pandemic, and we have to look at the appropriateness of the sample size, the surrogate endpoints, and the presence or the lack of randomization. So is there pandemic research exceptionalism during these times? And so the concern, as written in this article, the carnage of substandard research during the COVID-19 pandemic, a call for quality. So let me talk about, but there are some things that we could do differently during times of the pandemic. And let me, I want to move a little faster now. There is the issue of adaptive designs in a way to minimize the number of participants in the placebo group. And let me fast forward a little here. So essentially, usually in classical trials, we have two study arms. In adaptive clinical designs, usually we test multiple treatments at the same time, and as we get data during the trial, we may eliminate certain arms of the trial. So we could have this European trial, the discovery trial, included 5 treatment groups, and hence we minimize the number of patients who receive placebo. And let me skip that. And in the WHO Solidarity trial, it tested 4 different drugs or combinations in that study. And now, interesting enough, there was a randomized trial done by the NIH looking at remdesivir. However, there was a WHO adaptive trial looking at remdesivir. Now, the NIH study showed a beneficial effect of remdesivir. But guess what? In the WHO adaptive trial, it showed no effect of remdesivir. So which study is better? So essentially, we have this tension between adaptive trial and randomized controlled trial. And right now, there's a lot of concern that the drug remdesivir has really no effect on the outcome of COVID-19. Now, there's, in addition to adaptive trials, there's other type of study designs, cluster randomized trials. I have no time to really go into that. We have step wedge trials as well, and we could talk about that offline. So let me continue with, challenges for RECs in reviewing research. So essentially, we have to look at the capacity of ethics committees to respond in emergencies, where there are novel research designs being presented for approval. This creates additional challenges for RECs. These designs may not be covered by existing guidelines. Now, we have an urge to do more expedited reviews. However, such reviews should not compromise the quality of the review. And then now, having said all this, there was a recent study, qualitative research, that showed that with REC members engage with a broad range of research, they identified 3 important factors to consider when reviewing research. We have timeliness, responsiveness, and rigorous as key elements of reviewing the research. So in terms of expedited review, in one survey, we asked RECs if they did expedited review, and a large proportion said yes. They have so much research to review, they started to do more expedited reviews. Essentially, with expedited review, the concept is proportionate review. If the research study is of minimal risk and does not involve vulnerable populations, one does not need a full board review. You need more time spent on the more complex research proposals. So in terms of timeliness, how could REC attack the issue of timeliness? One could convene more ad hoc meetings, create subcommittees, do the review by teleconference, waive strict deadlines for protocol submission, bring protocols to urgency, have advisors do pre-review of the proposals, have willingness. Someone has to mute themselves. Okay, let me continue. One could engage with the researchers with their research proposals to speed up the review and also respond quickly to protocol modifications. In terms of responsiveness, one could offer more training to the members of the REC, establish policies and procedures for the review of disaster research, use of knowledgeable experts, develop partnerships between other RECs, and maybe think about the concept of central review, maybe have specialized IRBs review more of the complex research proposals. So we're talking now, we're talking about all these measures to be timely and responsiveness. However, we need to resist the pressure of urgency, provide careful scrutiny of all the protocols, and resist the external pressures and maintain the independence and the quality of the REC. So challenges to informed consent during these times, and there are several. One, there's disruption in the participant lives and family separation. It may be difficult to go through the informed consent process. There may be a lack of access to basic resources and services. There is this issue of the therapeutic misconception where potential participants may be thinking that they're mixing up medical care with research. Also, there is the issue of so-called desperate patients who want any drug whatsoever, and hence they'll sign up for any research study. So we have the issue of the therapeutic misconception. There may be issues of achieving meaningful informed consent and explaining to participants the issue of these novel adaptive designs. And think about this. Is informed consent even possible given how little we know about COVID-19? And then the other issue about data and bio specimens, and the important issue of data sharing, and essentially with regards to data and samples, data sharing is urgently needed to reduce the duplication of work, provide a clearer picture of epidemiology and pathology, and hence we need good principles for sharing data between investigators in other countries in order to get better answers in regards to therapeutics. Then we have the issue of community engagement during public health emergencies. And essentially, the major point with that is that the problem in the previous Ebola trials was that there wasn't good engagement with the community, and hence there was a lack of trust. And what I mean by that is that the community didn't want to be randomized to a placebo group. They didn't trust the investigators. So if one is going to do a randomized control study, you need to engage the community, gain their trust, and help them understand why they're being randomized to a placebo group. And so, right, yes, they have to be willing to accept the randomized study, okay? And if you don't, with regard to engaging communities, when you don't see the problem the same way, you can craft solutions together with solidarity. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. So, would you agree to participate in a drug trial during a public health emergency? Now, this is anonymous, all right? Don't worry, we won't know your answer. So in a previous survey, a large proportion said yes, but a lot of people said no and uncertain. So we may want to investigate the reasons for this. I think, I don't know if all right. Okay, good. So a lot of questions about doing research during times of pandemic. And the major question is, how far do we relax the rules for research during this time? And how do we address vulnerabilities, and how do we address risks? So we have two exercises. Let me, I don't know why I lost the sharing of the screen. We'll do the breakout rooms just like before. And I'll assign our faculty to the various breakout rooms. All right, so how many of us are back? Oh, most of us are back. So you guys are looking at my screen? Very good. All right, so I do want to make sure we're on the same page for the vulnerability. So as we see here, that most of us thought that there was a possibility of increased vulnerability during times of COVID, all right? And I agree with that. The question is why? What accounts for the increased vulnerability of participants? And this is what I was asking you. These are the different types of vulnerability: cognitive, economic, dependent relationships, social, medical. So essentially, is there more cognitive vulnerability, economic, institutional, social, medical? So that's why I asked you to rate it from 1 to 4, okay? And then in the comments, tell me why. If you put down 4 for cognitive, you have to tell me why, okay? So that's our mission. All right, so who wants to, free for all, who wants to talk about cognitive. Give me your rating and your comments. And just unmute yourself, okay? We're doing first come, first serve. Someone's sharing the screen again.
Hello, Prof. I'm Maro Magdi.
Wait,
Okay.
Chen, could you, you want to share your screen? Is that it? Who's talking?
I'm Marwa Magdi. Hello, Prof.
Yes, but who's sharing their screen? Who wants to share their screen? I saw a wonderful table.
Dr. Chin from breakout room number 9.
Do you want to? I could stop sharing my screen. Okay, who wants to share their work of art? Okay,
can
Jen's
everyone
coming
see?
on. All right, good.
Dr. Shavita, do you want to present here?
Go ahead.
Hello.
Jen, yeah.
Yeah.
Right the mic.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. We thought, thanks to the group, and I think I had a lot of learning with the discussion with them. We thought the cognitive vulnerability, we gave it a 2+. The areas we identified were the mental health burden, the online classes and the postponement of the exams for the students, the academicians, the cognitive burden on the public members who could not earn, cognitive burden on the medical workers who suffer the moral burden when there is not enough resources to provide, the cognitive burden on the community who could not go out during the lockdown period, especially the elderly at home who are dependent, highly dependent. The economic burden we...
Okay, so you gave it 2+.
Hello?
You gave it 2+. Okay, very good. Economic?
The economic burden we rated as 3+. We felt it is the developing countries which are hit hard. Of course, even the developed countries are facing tough times. More than the disease burden, we see that the economic burden drives the decision making of the patients, whether they opt for the treatment or not, whether they opt for isolation or the quarantine or not, because of the very threat to survival. So this was one of the key points. The institutional or the dependent.
So why would that increase their vulnerability to joining research? Now, what?
Dr. Silverman, I feel when you are in a situation, when the whole your life is in a situation where your survival is at stake, how I would look at from the participant's point of view is that research is something fancy. I would want to put it like that.
Okay.
If I was the participant. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Because the research makes no sense to me, because I'm in the deep thought of how am I going to feed my family tomorrow if I'm quarantined. You know? I mean, this might be hard to take, but I think that's the reality we are seeing when we see OPD patients with COVID positive.
Okay.
And institutional, the dependent ones, what we understood was probably about the prison mates, the old age homes, or the orphanages, which are catering to the dependents and the vulnerable population. We gave it as a 2+ for vulnerability. And they are at a place where they cannot be sent back home, but they have to be taken care of. The workers who are catering them there are leaving their jobs and going back to their homes. So nobody to really take care of them, and the psychological factors that affect them.
So why would that increase vulnerability in terms of research?
Well, I think that they have like no choice to make a proper decision because they are institutionalized. So they are mentally are affected. They are even before the COVID, they are already vulnerable. So plus with this COVID, they are even more vulnerable.
How? Why?
Because they are institutionalized.
Old age home. Why are they more vulnerable?
Not sure.
Because they are more vulnerable to the disease itself.
Okay. Orphanage.
It's that same theme of institutionalization, right? That's mentioned already by the previous speaker, the previous participant. It's the fact that when you're institutionalized, sometimes you don't get to speak for yourself. And there might not be, if you're a child or somebody who might have dementia or not your mental capacity, you may not be able to speak for yourself. You may not have someone there to.
Is COVID causing that?
Henry, can I discuss?
Yes, please, come on, please.
For these questions, during the COVID period, the potential participants of the COVID research are vulnerable, but vulnerable for all, but not very much in cognitive domain, because participants participating as a subject in the COVID research, the participants might not have vulnerable in cognitive domain. What I understand is cognitive mean they have a knowledge about the that research concerning COVID, the pandemic disease. This is not concerned with the COVID research. Maybe economic, yeah, they will be vulnerable. And institutional, there will be no specific guideline and policy. It is changing always, so it is also vulnerable. But cognitive, I'm not very much agree with the cognitive vulnerability in the of the participant in the COVID research. This is my point of view. Thank you.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. I'm still a little leery about institutional. COVID does not enhance, in my mind at least, the extent of institutional vulnerability. We're not locking up more people.
Henry, actually, in some countries, they are locking up more people, but it's also the fact that it's not just the virus that increases your vulnerability, but what comes with the COVID-19 pandemic, which are like lockdowns, restricted visits, different types of testing, targeted testing.
Well,
so many things come with the COVID-19.
Does that increase dependent relationships? Does lockdown increase dependent relationships?
Yeah, people can't access your loved ones. Old folks home sometimes don't. Old age homes.
I agree, but how does that increase dependency in terms of power relationships?
Yeah, may I say something?
Yes, because you don't have an advocate. Sorry. Yeah, go on, Christina. Sorry.
Institutional in the sense that you are hospitalized. And then it's your doctor, So your doctor is the one asking you to participate in the study.
So how does that differ from pre-pandemic times?
Yes, but you see, this one, you have condition. And he told you that there is no effective cure yet. No? And therefore, in our culture, you have that kind of fiduciary relationship with your doctor, so that more than before, during the time of COVID, then you have that feeling that you trust your doctor, he knows what is best, and therefore I will say yes. So I think that's the institutional dependency that happens in our
I agree,
culture.
but does COVID somehow enhance the magnitude of that dependency?
I would say yes, because if there's no COVID, you have a choice, because you are not sick, you have a choice to go back, not to go back. To choose
but in
doctor.
pre-pandemic times, when you're sick, you're sick, you're sick.
No, but still, there are options. There are options, no? There are more. There are proven
so now,
standards of care.
Now I think you're talking about medical vulnerability.
You cannot separate one from the other, So institutional in the sense that this is your doctor, this is your hospital, and you expect you have that trust that they will take care of you because you have no choice. See, so I think if you are inpatient, then
that's what I mean. Now we're talking about medical vulnerability where you're desperate, you have no choice, you want that drug. We have to unpack what we mean by medical vulnerability.
But it's also institutional because the source of care is your doctor, So it's institutional in the sense
Christina,
that
trust me, I love the way you're talking about doctors. Okay, don't get me wrong. All right, but let me go back to medical vulnerability. So a prime example would be the cancer patient with end-stage cancer, and the doctor dangles this new drug, and the cancer patient is desperate for this drug. And that's what happens in COVID. People are desperate for any new drug, even unapproved drugs.
I understand that, right? But in our culture, it's integrated. You cannot separate one from the other.
Okay, all right, time out. Let's take this conversation offline. But anyway, I just wanted to get that across. So what about social vulnerability? Let's have a spirited discussion on that. Who wants to talk about social?
Should I stop sharing here?
No. Keep that up. I love this chart. Thank you.
I would like to apologize. I was presenting and suddenly my internet went off. Sorry for that.
Okay, no need to apologize, but we'll take it anyway. Okay, who wants to talk about social vulnerability?
Yes, please, Dr. Henry.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Marwa.
I think there is a COVID exaggerates the social vulnerability because of the stigma associated with it. Contacting COVID constitutes extreme social vulnerability. Once your neighbor is diagnosed, you get afraid of them. You even might here in our country, you might prevent them from going back to their home at the peak of the pandemic. So contacting COVID constitute a social vulnerability from this point, from the stigma and discrimination. So they might accept to participate in research just to protect their families from having a stigma of having one of them infected.
So they may participate in research because of what reason?
Because of what?
Because of what reason? Why would they?
To ameliorate this stigma, to ameliorate the social stigma
I see.
of
Okay.
having.
All right. That's a good way to look at it. Let me just say that when you have increased stigma and marginalized people, there is a worry that of exploitation, that these individuals will be exploited in the eyes of the researchers, that they're easily exploited to go into research. Let me, because of time, let's unpack the issue of should we tolerate increased risk to participants when we enroll them in research. And I saw some wonderful comments in some of the groups. So who wants to give the answer to that? Yes. Don't be shy.
Can I answer?
Yes. Now let's have somebody else.
Okay.
Somebody raised their hand, I thought.
Can I share my answer?
Yes, please, Ines.
Maybe the cause of justifying such riskier research is the time pressure, as we have no time to save more lives and to save the majority, as the deaths are increasing and the people are already subjected to high risk. So the justification of riskier research that they are already in risk, so we can save more lives and decrease the risk on the long term because of the time burden.
Okay, all right. Right. I mean, sometimes I think research ethics needs to be looked at by a public health ethics framework, where we look at the individual versus the common good. And I mean, that's why we're approving human challenge studies, where healthy volunteers are being not only exposed to experimental vaccines, but to the virus itself. Also, let me end by mentioning this concept of risk parity, meaning that in times of pandemic, we are asking other groups to take on more risks, like healthcare workers, and we tolerate that. And hence, I mean, these are special times, and we are asking people to, someone has some kind of water fountain there, but anyway, we are asking people. What's that?
Oh, I just want to disagree with you completely.
Well, I'm going to have to mute you. So anyway, let me finish, and then I'll let you do what you usually do. Disagree with me completely, which is okay. I'm thick-skinned, but anyway,
Henry?
Why do we tolerate one at a time? I only want one person at a time attacking me, okay? Don't gang up on me, please, okay? My skin isn't that thick. Okay, all right, so we have to explain why we let other groups be exposed to increased risks as opposed to research participants. Okay, let the daggers fly. Go ahead, BB.
All right, very quickly, and I will not do justice to what I believe.
I don't think you will, but go ahead. Sorry.
I think that if that's what we believe, we need to recognise that we're turning research ethics on its head, and that
don't use a metaphor to justify your arguments, but go ahead.
Research ethics is founded very much rights-based philosophy. So respect for persons is central, and the central obligation of a researcher, the main obligation of a researcher is to minimise the risk to participants. If we are going to move away from that proposition, then I think we need a lot more ethical argument to occur than has occurred to date. We've had a couple of papers on human challenge trials which are equivocal, but will allow them. But I don't think that the huge move that would occur in research ethics, in which we agree that
Singapore time Indian time
in which we have determined what the researcher's role ought to be should be changed in a time of crisis where people have not had the opportunity to debate this out properly.
I think this is a good idea for a paper. Thank you. Dr. Johnson, we'll end with your comment.
Dr. Henry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the issues which I wanted to suggest was that especially in vulnerable patients during a pandemic, there will be a lot of health inequities, like the accessibility of even basic care will be affected.
Right.
So, not only that, so what are we talking about research? Because a normal person during a pandemic can access whatever he wants. Like he can go despite all the lockdowns or whatever issues are there. But vulnerable patients, especially I work in the field of psychiatry, so a lot of psychiatric patients are there. I know they have found a lot of difficulty even accessing care, getting their prescriptions filled, which is going to be a major challenges. So I feel accessing care itself is an issue in these patients. So even accessing research is double problem for them. So I thought I need to highlight this point.
Okay, thank you for those comments. All right, good. Wonderful discussions, really great. Wonderful comments. So we'll take a break for about 1 minute. And we have a poster session. Now, we'll take a break for 15 minutes. And now, this is the, we have 2 different Zoom rooms for the posters. We have 8 posters in one room and 8 posters in the other room, okay? And did I can't remember if I posted which sessions are in which room, but not to worry. So we'll have 8 presenters in this room, whoever they are, okay? Now, the 8 presenters in group 1, do you know who you are? Maybe, I'll tell you what, when I end, I want all the abstract presenters to show your videos to me, and we'll put you in one room, and then Yogesh, because it got lost in the chat box, could you retype the Zoom details for the other room?
Yeah, I'll do that now.
Okay, so Yogesh is gonna put down in the chat box the Zoom details for the other room. So essentially you could go back and forth, okay? Does that make sense?
Sure, Henry.
What's that?
No, I said yes.
Oh, yes, okay, all right, good. So again, I mean, whenever you want, in 10, 15 minutes, we'll have 8 presenters here and the other presenters over there. Okay? All right, so feel free to take a break. I tell you what, come back whenever. How's that for justice?
Great.
How's that for respect?
Yes, great.
Okay, all right, guys. I want all the presenters to stay here.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have breakout room posters. We have Uma, Ati, Dr. Meghna, Iman, Dr. Johnson, Nyan Su, Sri Devi, and Enos. Are you all here?
Yeah, yes, Henry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
All
Henry.
right. So,
Yes, I'm here.
all right, excellent. So you all remain here.
Okay.
Okay. And then group 2 will be Karima, Gia, Shore, Aisha, Cynthia, Khadija, Pio, and Wenjing. I know I'm not pronouncing this correctly, so I apologize. So you all go to the other room, and Yogesh put down the link to the other room, right?
Yes.
I was hoping that the poster presenters would
It
say
should be in the
yes.
chat box, the last message.
Okay, all right. I think that should work out.
Yeah, I think it should, because this Link I posted has a password embedded, so they don't need to enter any password. They can just click that and join the room. Yes.
Do they get put in a waiting room?
No, there's no waiting room. We've disabled the waiting room, but the password is embedded, so they don't need to enter a meeting passcode.
Okay. I don't know how you made it that way.
I just there's some setting which we had to change.
I see. Okay, very good. All right, so I'm not. So how we're going to do this? We have presenters here. Oh, should we share the screen of the posters?
Yeah.
Right. Did you? Should I? Yogesh, you want to? Are you able to share your screen?
Share my screen?
Yeah, go to the
Yeah, I can.
posters.
Oh, okay. So you should be able to see my screen now. Oh, somebody took over. These are the posters.
Oh, excellent. I just want to say that the posters are excellent. You all did a wonderful job.
Thanks, Henry.
I'm just overwhelmed with the effort you all put in. So, okay, so, I think the way this works is we could have it formal and have like a poster walk, and we could say this poster is now up for discussion and see who wants to talk about it. Maybe each poster presenter give 2 or 3 sentences about what the poster is about, just to remind everyone. And then if people have questions, I mean, what could I say? I'm making this up as we go through this process.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
How's that?
That's great.
Okay. All right.
Hello? Hello,
Hello.
Dr. Johnson. I heard the other room has already started.
Okay. Should we wait for Henry to come back, or should we start presenting?
I think
Yeah,
we
I think
should start
we could
presenting.
just wait for a couple more minutes. Mr. Henry should be here.
Oh, great. That's great.
Oh,
Sure.
okay.
Hi, Bindu. Thanks, Bindu. Thank you very much. പക്ഷെ അവിടെ കൂടുതൽ സംസാരിക്കാൻ വിടത്തില്ലല്ലോ. ഇല്ല അൺമ്യൂട്ടാണ്. So no problem. ഇല്ല പക്ഷേ still waiting. Let's see. Hope, keep our fingers crossed. Sure. Thank you, Bindu. Bye. Okay.
maybe we can start.
We'll wait for Henry to come, isn't it?
No, I think we can transfer from one room to another. That's my understanding yesterday in our meeting.
No, somebody told me to wait for Henry to come so that.
Yeah, I actually thought it'll be better if Mr. Henry is here when we start. But whatever you think is fine. We could.
No, we can wait for Henry to come, isn't it? Because he needs to review. Yogesh?
I agree. I agree. Yep.
But isn't he groggy already? He needs to sleep now.
Yeah, I know. It's quite late for him, isn't it?
My understanding during our meeting is that the two sessions will be simultaneous, not one waiting for the other.
I think the other one has already started, is it?
Sorry?
Has the other session started?
Yes, the other session has already started.
Right. He has seen all of them. So he wants the person to present his poster.
Oh, so looks like people who are more likely to. Looks like Mr. Henry is already in the other link.
Okay.
So we can start here.
Yeah, sure. Maybe Yogesh, you can lead the persons to present briefly. Kindly unmute.
You can actually start that.
You want me to
I'll
start?
stop my share. Yes, please.
Sure. Should I? No, it'll be nice if you show that poster, isn't it, Yogesh? So I can talk about it.
Okay, sorry. 1 second. I'll just. There we go. So which one are we starting with?
Mine is that with the milestones. No, you can see below. I think last.
This one here?
No, below. That milestone, below that. Yeah, on the right corner. The milestones. Yeah, that one. The story of a research. Yeah, up. The up one.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Apologies.
Yeah. Yeah, the up one. That. The story of a research proposal. Okay.
You want me to start playing this?
Yeah,
please,
that also
I think
is
we should start.
That gives the overview. Yeah, that gives. Please start.
Are you able to hear my computer audio?
No. You can't hear.
Oh, actually, that might be a problem. Okay, sorry, 1 second.
The poster is the story of a research. Now I can hear. A warm welcome to all of you for this conference. I would like to thank the conference team for selecting our e-poster. The title of the poster is The Story of a Research Proposal from its Inception to Completion. Ethical bumps and challenges experienced by the Institutional Ethics Committee. Myself, Dr. Johnson Pradeep, who's a lead author in this paper. Dr. Jayanti Savio, Professor Bindu Matthew,
I'm actually
Dr. Savita,
in both spaces. In both
Mrs. Manjulika Was, and Dr. Arvind Kasturi. We are a team of doctors working at St. John's Medical College, Bangalore, and from varied disciplines. The introduction of this e-poster is Institutional Ethics Committee play a vital role in upholding ethical standards in the conduct of a research study. Our IEC has come a long way from the challenges faced in the last 8 to 10 years. While several studies have looked at the lacunae in the functioning of IEC, there is limited literature on challenges faced and remedial measures taken. The objectives of this e-poster is to self-reflect and introspect of individual and systemic challenges faced by the IEC and the success of our remedial measures. The ethical challenges in the IEC workflow and possible remedial measures undertaken. So we have divided the discussion into 13 milestones which need to be achieved in a journey. The first is constituting an IEC team. It is very important to constitute an IEC team of experienced and motivated members, and also staying updated with the national regulatory requirements is of utmost use. Also, appointing external members through contact and referrals are very, very important for an IEC team. The next milestone is establishing an IEC secretariat. Very first important aspect is to identify a space in your campus, and you have to convince your management to give you a space and personnel so you can set up a IEC secretariat which will transact all the aspects of IEC. The third very important milestone in the journey is creation of standard operating procedures. It is very important that we adhere to national regulatory guidelines and the institutional policies also, and to train not only the IEC personnel and members, but also all your members or stakeholders in the research process. And also very important to update the SOPs every 2 years or earlier based on the needs. The next milestone is proposal submission by the investigators. So this is the most tough and the more challenging aspect. So very important is to enable the investigators to follow IEC procedures as laid down in the SOP. So strict deadlines for proposal submission should be planned. And we have created a user-friendly IEC proforma to help them to fill the proforma easily and submit it without any hassle. It's very important to train the investigators on how to fill and to have a very clear mandate about presenting it to the IEC. There are challenges in the pre-meeting requirements also, in terms of it's very important to fix the number of full board reviews and confirming the dates for the meetings, and have a pool of subject experts so that inviting them well in advance will help you in your meeting. So before the meeting, it's very important to hand over the proposals to the reviewers well in advance, and to appropriate reviewers so that they get adequate time to review the study. And also we have a well-designed reviewers checklist to reduce the time and easy review so that they can give their comments and close the study. The next important milestone is a meeting. There are challenges in terms of declaration of conflict of interest, emergency non-availability of confirmed members. So it's mandatory to have self-declaration and recusal during discussion and decision, and identifying members with dual roles to fulfill quorum. Post-meeting, there can be a lot of problems in terms of convincing the PIs of the unfavorable decisions and the need to successful closure of all observation. Granting final approval upon satisfactory closure of all observation is a must. So after a study is approved and has started, it's very important to monitor it on a regular basis, and also to make sure that audits are conducted regularly, especially in high risk and vulnerable studies, and making sure that they submit all the interim reports and other reports as notified by the federal authorities. Next comes the study closeout. So most of the time, the investigators do not submit the reports, and that can cause a lot of difficulties to close a study. So make it mandatory that if they don't submit, that they will not be given newer studies. So with that, most of them will submit their studies honestly. Not only the IEC the whole process of study, we need to monitor the IEC functioning also. To improve the quality, you can have an internal or an external audit so that the quality of the IEC will improve. The 12th milestone is changing requirements by national regulatory authorities. So it's very important that you keep update and abreast of what is happening in the national and international arena. The last but not the least is the capacity building. It's very important that the members are encouraged to attend workshops, conferences, and training sessions. And IEC, we have initiated a lot of competitive grants for ethics related research for students, faculty, and members of IEC. So in the end, I would like to conclude saying that an experienced and motivated team of IEC members operating with a set of standard guidelines is the way forward. Thank you.
Sorry, it was a little more detailed presentation because we had to cover a lot of things. So that's the reason there are a lot of issues to be discussed. I think any queries, Dr. Eamon or Minzu, any doubts that you can ask me.
Hello, can you
Hi.
hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi. In all this, do the IEC also have the appeal process in their TORs? Where the
Like
PI
what do you
is
mean?
not satisfied?
What do you mean by appeal process? Sorry.
I mean, if the project is rejected, can the PI resubmit it? He or she could appeal.
Yeah, we do have a, that is post meeting. We have written the details in that. Definitely, when studies are pended or if it is provisionally approved, it is sent back to the reviewers back or the PIs back, saying that these are the issues they have in the study. They need to correct that. So they can revise and send it back to the ethics committee again with all the responses or clarifications. So that again goes to the reviewer and the reviewer will check. And if he feels that, yes, they have answered all the questions, he will approve the study. Or if he still has clarification, he will again communicate and make sure that the response are adequate enough for the approval.
Thank you. This is for the where the amendments are required. But
yes.
What if the committee rejects the study?
Yeah, definitely. We have rejected maybe 1 or 2 studies where we found unethical issues, and we have given a feedback to the PI. Definitely, we have stopped certain studies or rejected certain studies, saying that this cannot be done in this arena. So they take it. I mean, with the proper reasoning, if you give a response, I think they do accept it. Or unless they would like to resubmit it with removing all the unethical issues.
Can the PI start the study before approval?
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Can the PI start the study before approval, as you have just mentioned?
No. They cannot.
Just mentioned that we will ask the PI and he or she will stop the study.
No. They cannot start the study unless they get a proper approval, written approval from the IEC.
Okay. And you also asked for not the final report, but the midterm report or so?
Yeah, we do have especially for clinical trials, or if we feel that in academic trials there is a need for a interim report. It is during the review time, we do have a checklist. In that, we suggest that they better present an interim report, maybe 6 monthly or 3 monthly, depending on the study and the risk of the study. So based on that, they will submit an interim report to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Johnson, I would like to applaud you and your team for this wonderful e-poster presentation. Not only the information is wonderful, but also the presentation is so eye-catching. So
Sure, thank you.
really, a job well done.
Thank you,
But my question to you is, towards the end of the presentation, you mentioned about capacity building.
Yes.
Now, I have two questions pertaining to this. One,
Sure.
who is the capacity building training for, and what does it entail?
Yeah, the capacity building is for IEC members and also for the PIs, the investigators also. So it's very important that we need to equip IEC members of the latest updates, latest guidelines, a regular capacity building for them so that they improve their knowledge about the latest guidelines and latest issues related to research studies. So that is one issue. And also updating the knowledge of investigators, whether it is a student or a faculty, about what are the updates which is recently happening in the arena of ethics. So it is for all, actually. The whole institute has to be educated about the latest guidelines and what are the minimum requirements for a study. So all those things are updated through capacity building. And we do appreciate a lot of research from students, and we do grant funds for them also, a minimum amount, but still that can help in creating a lot more awareness in the students and faculty also.
What I've noticed normally is when there is a training that is declared in the institute, you know, the department heads and the institution heads, they come, sit there for about 5 minutes just to, you know, motivate the participants, and then they just disappear. How would you ensure that the training is actually conducted in the manner it ought to be conducted, and that everyone attends it and takes away from the training?
Sure. So one is making a pre and post test mandatory so that we have their presence, and if they don't attend, they don't get a certificate. So if they don't get a certificate, they are not qualified to present a proposal during the IEC. So we catch them during the presentation of their pro forma. So in that way, indirectly, it is connected that they cannot submit studies without being upgraded or attended that particular session.
That is wonderful if you're able to, you know, mandate that in your institute.
We are
Thank
very
you so
serious
much.
about that. Like, we are very serious about that. And every
That's
year
wonderful.
we conduct educational upgradation or capacity building for our own PIs, new students who come in, especially in the beginning of their course when they are supposed to submit their synopsis to the university. So that time itself, we start our process so that the new guides and the new students are aware of the rules and regulations and SOP also.
That is wonderful. Good job, Dr. Johnson. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, why don't we move on? That was excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Excellent. Who's next?
Can I present?
Who wants to go next?
Dr. Uma Kulkarni.
Okay. Yes, please.
The second row, second one.
Okay.
This one here? Is it this
Yes.
one?
Yes, that is the one. The one with the central circle. No, the one below. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There was a
about
row. There was a row above it which I could not see. So.
Is it this one, right? Okay.
No, not that one. That is Meghna. No. This is the one.
Greetings from Yenapoya Ethics Committee, Yenapoya University, Mangalore, India. I, Dr. Uma Kulkarni,
and I, Dr. Ravi Vaswani,
present a case of neglect of conflict of interest and ethics committee experience.
Conflict of interest is said to exist when a researcher investigating a product or a drug or any medicine which is new has a concurrent secondary interest in the form of personal gains.
The secondary interest can be financial or non-financial. It could be existing or potential, obvious or camouflaged, measurable or subjective, acceptable or unacceptable, and sometimes declared or undeclared.
Conflict of interest in research can induce bias at several levels: in the study design, in the participant recruitment stage, in the data collection stage, in the analysis stage, and even during dissemination of results.
Interest-driven research can have far-reaching consequences on the scientific evidence, healthcare practices, policies, and guidelines. Therefore, the ICMR urges all stakeholders to disclose any conflict of interest and manage it appropriately to uphold principles of transparency and accountability.
Conflict of interest disclosure and management relies on the awareness, willingness, and integrity of researchers. Ensuring it becomes the responsibility of ethics committees. We share our learning experience about a conflict of interest management by researchers.
So what began as a routine site monitoring of a protocol by ethics committee paved way for identification of a host of conflict of interest issues. This paper is about the chance detection of an undisclosed conflict of interest in research, root cause analysis of its non-disclosure, pinpointing the shortcomings in the checklist and remedial revisions adopted. The authors explored these by scrupulously interviewing the researchers, scrutinizing the protocols, screening the data collected, and assessing the need for corrective action.
What we observed was that the undisclosed aspect of the protocol was that researchers were a startup company, the miners manufacturing the diagnostic products under investigation. The researchers shared this information across a casual conversation during their site monitoring visit.
During the protocol submission, we tried to see what was written in the protocol application form against the column of conflict of interest. It was written non-applicable. And this was basically because of the lack of understanding of the concept of conflict of interest.
Further, with the further issues we found after the undisclosed, the unaware, was the unaddressed. Data from all studies was collected, analyzed, and handled by the conflicted researchers across other protocols.
So what we saw was, it was not restricted to only this study, but the same researchers were using the same products and running simultaneous studies parallelly, indicating that this error was much more amplified.
The author's analysis of the observations include a lack of awareness among researchers about conflict of interest, its disclosure and management, inadequacies in the conflict of interest declaration or the checklist in use by the ethics committee, and inadequacies in the review process of conflict of interest disclosure and management.
So the impact was that checklist revision was done by the ethics committee. From a rudimentary checklist which was previously present, we made a dedicated, detailed and validated checklist in order to prompt and make sure that researchers disclose the conflict of interest definitely.
Checklist revision for EC reviewers was also done. The superfluous review checklist was revised and a more robust one was made to include the nature of conflict of interest, the possible impact on research, management strategies, need for data safety management board, site monitoring visits, and much more. Focused training of stakeholders in conflict of interest disclosure and management is also planned.
So from this, we conclude that the trigger event which opened a Pandora's box helps YEC1 strengthen strategies for disclosure, review, and management of conflict of interest by the researchers. Hence, the importance of a vigilant and proactive ethics committee with remedies and strategies for prompt disclosure and effective management of conflict of interest in research cannot be overemphasized. This will go a long way in ensuring transparency and accountability in research.
The authors would like to declare that permission was obtained from YEC1 chairperson for making this presentation, maintaining anonymity of researchers, and the authors have no conflict of interest to declare themselves.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that was a good presentation, Dr. Uma. It was really excellent poster. I have a question.
Yes.
The poster has really come out very well.
Thank you.
So there are two questions I have. One, how do you manage conflict of interest during a session or a meeting, or when all the IEC members meet? My second question is, sometimes a conflict of interest can arise during the study itself. After, let's say, you approve the study, and later on, there may be conflict of interest. So how are you going to tackle these two issues?
Yes, sure. So the first question is about EC members managing conflict of interest. So we had a very detailed SOP for management of conflict of interest by the EC members. So at the time of, since I'm the member secretary and a protocol comes wherein I am a part of the research protocol, I hand it over to the joint secretary for that person to decide who's going to review whether it is expedited, whether it is full review. I will not touch the protocol. I will not know the comments. I'll not take part in any of the discussions. And once in the ethics committee meeting, the person who has a conflict of interest walks out of the meeting during the discussion of that protocol and is called back by the secretary once decision has already been made, does not take part in decision making, does not take part in the voting process, nor in writing the minutes. So that particular thing is not, the person who has a conflict of interest does not even contribute to writing the minutes of that particular protocol. So that is how we are managing at this point of time. Second, your second question was if there is no conflict of interest at the time of submission of the protocol, but the conflict of interest arises towards the middle of the protocol or towards the end of the protocol, and how do we manage? So we did not have, so I guess this is in terms of conflict of interest of the researchers and not DEC members. Are you referring to the researchers? Okay, so we had a very rudimentary checklist, to be honest. We just had one column which said, do you have conflict of interest? Is it financial or non-financial? And invariably the investigators used to write no, not applicable, not applicable. So we have now come up with a detailed conflict of interest declaration form for the researchers, in which we are writing in detail all the components that can give rise to conflict of interest, including financial, non-financial, or anything related to the product. In that, in the end, we have added that if not now, is there a possibility for you to get into a conflict of interest situation at a later date? And if yes, then you are supposed to submit a conflict of interest declaration at any point of time when it arises. So we have termed it as a potential conflict of interest. If they know, they declare it at that point of time and say that right now I don't have conflict of interest, but there is a possibility of potential conflict of interest. If they say no, then whenever there is a situation that arises where there's a conflict of interest, they are supposed to declare it. So that is how we are planning to work.
My query is, let's say they've started to study, they're middle of the study, and they have declared conflict of interest. So what will you do? What is the protocol follow, or what do you follow?
Okay, so we need to analyze the data. So this is what happened with the case that we have presented. So there was no conflict of interest that was declared, and during a site monitoring visit, we found out that there is a definite conflict of interest in this situation. So we scrutinized all the data that was collected. We advised them to appoint somebody else apart from the research team members, because all the research team members had the conflict of interest. There were 3 of them, all of them had conflict of interest. So we asked them to appoint another person who is not having conflict of interest to collect the data henceforth and analyze it. Also scrutinize the data that has already been collected and try to see whether there's a possibility of bias. So this is the best that we could do. If there are any suggestions, you're welcome. Yeah,
that's excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anything else that I need to?
Hello. Dr. Uma and Dr. Ravi, congratulations on this wonderful presentation. I think the way you have self-assessed to improve the functioning of the IEC is something we all need to learn. This is a part of capacity building, I feel, for the IEC members. In that context, I would want to, can you please share about what is the mechanism of audits in your setup? How often do you do? Is there anything that you have a system in place which makes sure that there are regular audits of the studies to disclose such conflict of interest or any other issues for that matter?
Yes. So we have 2 types of site monitorings. One is the root cause, one is the for cause monitoring, and the other one is the routine one. Routine one is done in most of the cases of clinical trials at a pace of 3 monthly or 6 monthly or yearly, depending on the risk that is associated. So once we had a vaccine trial for which we have conducted every 3 months a site monitoring. And then otherwise we conducted 6 monthly or even annually, depending on the risk. For academic trials also we conduct site monitoring on a routine basis, and the decision of conducting site monitoring is done at the time of clearance of the protocol during the ethics committee meeting. That is one part. Apart from this, we are also conducting for cause monitoring. That is, whenever we have too many protocol deviations, we are conducting it. We are also conducting for very high risk studies where we feel that this is the first time in humans where we had a couple of protocols like that, where we said that we are going to site monitor at the time of first recruitment of the participant, and we get a call on the previous day. We ask them to inform us on the previous day so that we are prepared as a team. We go there with our checklist and we observe the whole informed consent and the way it is taken and whether it is recorded properly, whether comprehension is tested, whether there's any issue with voluntariness. So this is one form. The least, or you can say the less serious form is this audit, in which we ask the PI to come with all the documents relevant to the data, that is data collection forms as well as informed consent forms, to the ethics committee, and 2 or 3 members of ethics committee sit with the data and try to match with the protocol to see whether they are collecting any excess data, whether they are recruiting more samples than required, whether validity period is adhered to or not, whether protocols are adhered to or not. And we have presented this in the last FERCAP conference, where we have detected a lot of protocol deviations during audits. So these are the exercises, and that keeps us very busy. The site monitorings and the audits really keep us very busy in the ethics committee. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a very robust system in place, something very similar to what we have in our institution. Thank you, Dr. Ma. Do you face any challenges in terms of the manpower and the time that each member needs to give for these audits? Because that is one constant, I think all the IEC members, all the IECs face, right?
Yeah.
Do you
So
face
as in, definitely, I agree with you, because it takes really, in a committee of 12 members, you need at least 3 or 4 who are ready to come to ethics committee at any point of time. Mostly the internal members. So in our ethics committee, myself, Dr. Ravi Vaswani, Dr. Nagapati Bhatt, who is the pharmacologist, and another clinician, Lakshmi Narayan Sonde, we are all very dedicated and we spend a lot of time in the ethics committee. And although our hospital timings are till 3:30 in the afternoon, we stay back till 5:30 every day to do the EC work. And I think to a large extent our dedication and time management and the extra time that we are putting into ethics committee work is helping the ethics committee grow a lot. I think that there are challenges. We can't get everybody, we can't get the layperson to come for site monitoring every time, we can't get the social scientist to come every time, but that becomes a little difficult for us. But rest of us are, yes, we are the strength of the ethics committee.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
A question: how do you address when there is a conflict of interest from the institutional head?
Okay, so institutional head is neither a part of the ethics committee nor is a part of the scientific review board, and so there's nowhere there's a possibility of conflict of interest in approval or reviewal of the protocols. Because if I remember when I joined newly the ethics committee and I was the joint secretary, there was a protocol from the institution head, our medical college dean, which was a student project guided by him. I had 26 comments to write. And for the first moment, I had hesitated, should I really write 26 comments to the principal saying that these are the changes which are requested by the ethics committee? But yes, I did it. He took it very gracefully and he responded to all the comments. And therefore, there is no problem and there's no interference from the heads of the institutions in the committee functioning, and therefore we don't face any conflict of interest issues related to heads of the constitution, heads of the institution.
Hello, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions for the last. Number 1, is there a lot of work for your research at this committee? Do you have the full-time research ethics committee member in an institution? And second question, my honest question is, are all members of the research ethics committee are paid or unpaid on a salary basis? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So thank you so much for the question. So we are a 12-member committee, of which 6 of us are full-time affiliated to the university. So we are all available. 6 of us are always available within the campus unless we are on leave. So that takes care of it. So the 4 of us I mentioned are more dedicated than the rest of them. And 2 of us are most of the time in the ethics committee when we don't have our primary department work. So for example, when I don't sit in the department staff room, but I come and sit in the ethics committee staff room, ethics committee room, so that I can dedicate more time to my ethics committee work, because this has become my more closer to me than ophthalmology. That is the first question. And the second question, can you just repeat? I think I lost that question.
Are the members of the ethics committee
Yes.
are paid or
Yeah.
unpaid on a salary basis?
No,
Thank you.
we are not paid. We are not paid, and none of us has ever received any monetary benefit because of our work towards ethics committee. But the external members are being paid for each meeting that they come and attend. They get a sitting fee of 2,000 rupees. So none of our members have openly asked for it. Probably it's there in some of the members' minds, but they have never approached. So when we had our NABH accreditation, the accreditator suggested to us that because you're doing so much work, seeing the work that we have done, she asked us to go and approach the management asking for some remuneration for the internal members too, but we still haven't done it. Somehow we are enjoying the work even without money right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, may I ask some question, please?
Yes, Roshni.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. It is a very interesting topic. My question is, would you like to share the guideline that you have to adapt that for your checklist?
Yes, so we have prepared 2 checklists right now. One is for the researchers for declaring the conflict of interest, and the other one is for the reviewers. It has just got validated, and it will be approved in the next ethics committee meeting, that is in the first week of December. Once it is done, we will be sharing it on the website. So definitely it will be available for anybody to use it. And this is our website, www.ethics.edu.in. And in that there's the EthCom page on which it will be uploaded. So we are waiting for approval by the ethics committee. And once it is approved in the ethics committee full review meeting, then we will be putting it up on the website.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Uma, there is a request for you to open your, turn on your video so that they can see.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I completely forgot about it. Yes. I thank everyone for the questions and interaction and appreciating the presentation. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir. Henry, sir.
Thank you very much. Shall we go to the next poster? Thank you. Shall we go to the next poster, please?
How many more posters do we have?
We only finished for 2 posters.
So what should we do about timing?
Next poster speaker, please.
May I go next, please?
How much more time, in the interest fairness to all the participants, how much time should we spend on the remaining posters?
Maybe 5 minutes for the presentation.
Okay, well, what?
If they can briefly present, Henry, because it will not be fair if we others don't present. Very briefly, if they can all present their posters.
Right, no, I'm not saying not present, but what, 5 minutes for a presentation and 5 minutes for discussion? I just want to put some boundaries, that's all.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, let's go.
I go next?
Yes.
Okay, it's the unethical authorship, possible practice. Yeah, that's the one. No, the one over that. The one next to that. Unethical authorship. I mean, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you.
Speak to your poster.